Hi, welcome back. So in today's lesson, we are going to go through the second key question for global tourism. Alright, the key question that we are talking about is that why has tourism become a global phenomenon? So in this lesson, we will particularly explain the fluctuations of global tourism, the reason for why there is an irregular rising and falling of tourist numbers or receipts. Alright, so in the previous lesson, we talked about the growth of global tourism, right? Why there's an increase in global tourism. In this lesson, we are actually talking about the fluctuations. In other words, we are focusing on why the numbers are irregular. Okay, sometimes it might be rising and sometimes it might be falling. So under this topic, you need to remember the acronym DDRP. So what does this four acronym means, right? So it refers to the disasters that is happening in the area, okay, diseases, okay, regional and global recession R, as well as the last one, P, political situations. So under these four events, okay, there are some case study which you need to know, such as the Iceland volcanic eruption, the Japan tsunami, right, E. coli outbreak in Germany in 2010, as well as the latest example which you can use would be COVID-19 in 2020. Okay, then we talk about the global recessions occurring between 2008 to 2010, and finally there's a Thailand political unrest in 2010 itself. So the reasons for the regional fluctuations, all right, when we talk about this, we are always talking about key events that affect the tourist destination. So these events can occur within and outside the country itself, all right. And for the first event which we talk about is the disaster that may happen. So what are disasters? They are events that cause great damage to properties. They may lead to injuries, all right, or cause a great loss in life. Okay, so because of these disasters such as an earthquake, okay, volcanic eruption, tsunami, and so on, okay, they actually pose a safety risk. Okay, they pose safety risk to the people, so they disrupt the essential tourist activities in the area. All right, and together this will actually discourage tourists to visit the place, so they do not want to visit the affected place, and this will result in a loss in tourism receipts and income in the affected place. Okay, so when we talk about tourism receipts, basically we are referring to this tourist spendings in a location, so the receipts that they generate because of the amount of money they spend. All right, so because there's a loss in tourist receipt and income in the place, the locals working in that place will actually be affected, and they themselves are no longer able to travel as much. All right, so the tourists in the affected place, they are discouraged to travel overseas as well. Okay, so to sum up, what will a disaster do? So number one, it poses safety risk to the area. So it also disrupt the tourist activity. So this will discourage people from visiting the area. And when people are discouraged from visiting the place, all right, there will be lesser income for the locals in the area. So the locals themselves are not able to travel overseas. So overall, this will result in a overall decrease in tourism activities in the region, or if let's say it's a very popular destination, it might result in a decrease in tourism activity from travelers from different global areas. All right, so let's take a look at an example to show this. So in March 2011, there was an earthquake occurring in Japan, okay, in the ocean to the east side of Japan. So this actually result in a tsunami which hit the city of Fukushima. All right, and just so happened that the tsunami damaged a nuclear reactor, which result in a nuclear meltdown in the area. All right, so because of this earthquake disaster, right, and the resulting tsunami and nuclear meltdown, it actually causes a drop in the international tourist numbers despite the peak season which occurred in April. All right, so people do not want to visit the place because the earthquake and tsunami actually damage the tourist attractions, damage the accommodations that people might stay, and also the potential tourists, they feel that the place is unsafe because of the nuclear meltdown. There's actually nuclear radiation ongoing in the place. So people worldwide do not want to visit the town of Fukushima and nearby areas during that period of time. All right. So what did the government do? The government actually tried to promote efforts. They actually tried to promote tourism activities in the area by showing that the area is safe and Japan is overall a beautiful country, and so people should continue to visit Japan. Okay, just maybe not to the immediate area that was affected by the earthquake, tsunami, and the nuclear radiation. All right. So for factor number 2, we are focusing on the regional and global recessions. So what are recessions? Okay, they are a period of general slowdown in economic activities. So basically, what this refers to is that there is lesser spending by the people. All right. So due to different reasons, a recession might happen, and people might not be able to spend as much money as before. So one of the reason is the loss of jobs. All right. So during a recession, okay, companies might retrench their workers. So people would lose their jobs. Okay, and when they lose their jobs, they would have lesser income. Okay, they would have no or lesser income. So because of this, there is a decrease in the amount they can spend. So there's a decrease in spending, and there's also a decrease in demand for goods and services. Okay, particularly for the need of travel. All right. So this might affect the tourism industry as a whole, because when a large number of people are not able to spend money, all right, the tourism activities in the area would actually decline and decrease. Okay, so at the same time, people might choose to go for domestic tourism instead. Okay, the reason being is that if they travel within the country, it is cheaper for them. And remember that during a recession, they have lesser spending power, so they might want to travel within the country for their leisure. All right. So why is it cheaper? Because the distance is shorter. All right, and typically the transport would also be cheaper. All right, so you might fly on short haul flight within your country instead of long haul flight towards other countries, so it would be cheaper. Okay, at the same time, tourist organizations in many countries, they might want to promote domestic tourism. So the reason for this is that during a global recession, there would be lesser tourists visiting the country itself, right? So the tourist organization in the countries, they would have lesser business. Okay, so they might also want to encourage people within their country to visit the local attractions, right, instead of traveling overseas. So the effect of this is to encourage people to contribute to their own country's economy, all right, to encourage people to spend money within their own country and help the local businesses instead of traveling to overseas. So overall, there would be a decrease in the number of international tourists as well. So this results in a fluctuation. All right. So for example, there was a global recession in year 2008 to 2011. So this recession actually lasted for 3 years. Sometimes the recession might be a short one, such as a few months towards a year. Okay, sometimes it might be a long drawn out recession, such as in this case, the global recession actually lasted for 3 years. All right. So tourism reports in Egypt, Morocco, and Greece. Okay, what happened was that the tourists stayed for a shorter length of time. Okay, because they have lesser amount to spend, so they also do not go for long travels. All right. Then they also spend less money per day. Okay, they try to save money even on their travel, so they stayed at cheaper accommodations. Okay, they might look towards staying in a resort or even in Airbnb instead of staying in those high-end hotels. All right. And total, as a result of this, there is the tourism receipts actually decline. All right, so the locals are earning lesser money because of the decline in tourist activities, the amount of length of time they stay, and the amount they spend in the location itself. Okay, so for factor number 3, we talk about political conflicts. So political conflicts, they are disagreements between different groups of people. Okay, fights and wars can occur. All right, so these groups of people are actually those who are governing the place. All right, it can happen between countries as well as within countries itself. So when we talk about between countries, we talk about the relationship between countries such as China and America. All right, and then when within a country, Okay, so sometimes the different political parties in the country might be fighting against one another, and then this can also lead to armed conflicts and even war may happen. Okay, so the impact of all these political conflicts is that there will be damage to infrastructure and the disruption of services. Okay, so in the case, especially if there's a war, uh, tourism infrastructure might be damaged. So the things like your roads, okay, your accommodation, your hotels, electrical line, okay, your your water transport, things like that may be disrupted. All right. So this would not only disrupt tourist activities, it can also poses danger to the tourists and the residents itself. Okay, and so because of these two factors, a place might no longer be attractive and the tourists might not want to visit the area. All right. So number two is also that during political conflicts, the government authorities they might issue travel advisory, okay, to ban or to discourage people from traveling to the country itself, because as a government they would want to protect their citizens. So if they know that a place is unsafe, they would actually discourage their citizens from traveling to that area, okay, from traveling to the particular region or the country, right? So at the same time, the tourists themselves might want to postpone or cancel their own travel plans. So an example of this would be the Libya civil war in 2011, okay, 2011. So during that time, there was a civil war in the country of Libya, and armed groups are actually fighting against each other. So most governments at that time actually banned their citizens from visiting the country. In particular for two reasons. Number one is they do not want the citizens to be held hostage or to be injured in any way. Okay, number two, they also do not want the citizens visiting Libya to participate in the political conflict at that time. All right, so they banned travel to Libya. Okay, and at the same time, commercial airlines they also reduce or stop their flights to Libya, okay, between March and October. All right, so this would be a safety risk. Okay, the commercial airlines they do not want to fly any aeroplane above Libya because the military or the people who are involved in the armed conflict might actually choose to shoot down the aeroplane. Okay, so it will cause some damage to the company itself, and so they do not want this to happen. Okay, so they reduce, or some companies reduce the number of flights, while other companies actually stop the flights to Libya itself. So all this had the effect of disrupting tourism activities. Alright, okay, the last factor that we are focusing on is actually on diseases. So diseases are sudden and widespread occurrence of a disease in an area, okay, in a country, or it could even spread regionally or globally. Okay, so the impact of this is that tourists do not want to do not want the risk of getting infected with a contagious disease, okay, because this would affect their health and it might even cause in death. All right, and then number two is that the tourists they may postpone or cancel their travel plans. So because they want to avoid the risk, they do not want to travel to the place, so they might cancel it totally or they might delay it for 1 or 2 years until the diseases has died down. Okay, so at the same time, government authorities may issue travel advisory, especially if the disease is contagious. A government might not want their citizens to travel to that place, and then after a while they return back to their home country and spread the disease within the country itself. So very good example would be in 2020 during the COVID-19 outbreak. Okay, the Singapore government actually discouraged Singaporeans from traveling to countries which has a high infection rate, such as China, because they don't want the local citizens to be infected and with COVID-19, as well as come back to Singapore and then spread the virus locally. All right, so it might be a very difficult situation to manage, and hence the government will issue the travel advisory or even to ban citizens from traveling to affected countries itself. All right, so that is with regards to the government. And then the last group of people, okay, businesses, they might also want to postpone or cancel their events, their MICE activities. all right, because usually this kind of large-scale MICE events, right, would invite uh, tourists from multiple countries to visit, all right. So if one of the tourists is infected, okay, and then they attend the event, they might unknowingly uh, spread the disease to everyone else, all right. So during the when there's a period of outbreak of such contagious diseases, okay, a lot of times MICE events would be cancelled. So example, besides the recent COVID-19, you can also talk about H1N1 influenza in 2009, all right, 2009. So H1N1 is also known as the swine flu. Okay, if you notice, this is also the period whereby the global recession happened, all right. So there is an influenza outbreak in USA, Mexico, and Spain. Okay, so this swine flu originated from the pigs, all right. So the pigs actually have the flu virus, and then from the swine, from the pigs, it actually spread to human, all right. So this swine flu can actually be fatal. If you are infected by it, there's a risk of death, right? And because of this, there's a widespread cancellation of holiday bookings by tourists from USA, Canada, and Europe to Mexico. Okay, so people do not want to visit Mexico in 2009 because of this, all right? And then just a little detail about the H1N1 influenza. Okay, is in 1918, it used to be known as the Spanish flu, all right, because it happened in Europe, in particular Spain. So at that time, it was still from affecting chicken and humans, all right. And then in 1957, there's the Asian flu, H2N2. So during this time, the influenza is actually in chicken, okay, and that occurred in Asia. Okay, then there's a H3N2 version, which is in 1968, happening in Hong Kong. And finally, in 2009, okay, this time the flu virus is in the swine itself, and we call it H1N1, right? So during this time, the virus actually transferred from the pigs to humans, and then it was contagious among humans as well, okay, affecting us. And it may even cause the loss of life, so people do not want to visit Mexico in 2009. All right, and then we can take a look at the chart showing the number of deaths worldwide. So you can see some countries are heavily affected, such as USA, okay, Brazil, India, China, okay, Bangladesh, Indonesia, all right, even in Russia, Europe. So all these places have large number of infections, okay, more than 1,500 people are dying during that period of time. Right, so we have come to the end of this session. So basically you need to remember is that reasons for fluctuation in global tourism. All right, fluctuation refers to the rise and fall in tourist number, and then there are 4 different factors which might cause the fluctuation. All right, so the 4 factors includes diseases, okay, disasters, recession, and also political conflict. All right, so there's a activity over here. Okay, you may visit this website. Right, this website over here. So on this website, you can actually scroll to the bar graphs, overseas residents, visits to Japan by the year itself. Okay, so this website shows us the number of visitors in Japan. And then you can scroll down to look at the overseas residents visit by year. All right, so we can look at the trend of tourist visitors to Japan from 1964 all the way until 2020. Okay, so after you are looking at this graph over here, I want you to analyze the tourism trends from 2008 to 2021. All right, you can click the bar to get specific data. Okay, so if we look at the graph over here, 2008, okay, all the way to 2021. So in 2008, we see that the tourism number is actually 8,350,000, all right. And then in 2021, there are a total of 245,000 visits only. Okay, so try to describe the trend in global tourism in Japan between this time period. And then when you have done that, you can look at question 4 and 5. So identify the years in which there's a fall in the tourist arrivals in Japan. And question 5, using the table in the next slide to account for the falls. All right. So if we look at the tourist number, okay, in 2008, as I mentioned previously, 8.3 million. Okay, and then all the way until 2019 is actually 31 million visits. All right, so between 2008 to 2019, there is a huge increase, okay, a huge increase in the number of tourist visits, all right, from 8.3 million to 31.8 million. Okay, however, between 2019 to 2020, okay, what happened? There is a plunge in tourist number from 31.8 million. It plunged down all the way until 4.1 million. And in 2021, the numbers actually declined even more to 245,000. Right? So this is the trend in tourist numbers. Okay, so that is for question 1. Now for question 2, identify the years in which there's a fall in tourist numbers. So the year, as previously mentioned, okay, the year would be in, there's a slight fall over here as well. Okay, 2008 to 2010, there's a fall. Okay, 2010 to 2011, there's a fall. And the last year with a decrease would be 2019 to 2020. Or you can also say it would be from 2019 to 2021. All right, so there are 3 periods of fall in tourist number between 2008 to 2009, between 2010 to 2011, and then the last period will be 2019 to 2021. Okay, so using the table in the following slide, all right, account for the fall. So let us look at the table over here. Let me just minimize this screen. All right, so the 3 time period you have to fill up when, which I just mentioned to you. Okay, the events, so the details as to what happened, and then explain the factor causing the fluctuation. Right, so the first one will be between 28 to 2010. Okay, what was the event that happened? If you had gone through the slide, all right, you can pause the video, look through the slides to decide what is the event that happened. Okay, otherwise, the event that happened would actually be the first one on the global recession. Okay, so you can talk about the global recession between 28 to 2011. All right, and then for the second time period, okay, between 2010 to 2011, that one would be your swine flu. Okay, and the last time period would be between 2019 to 2021. Okay, that one I think all of us would know that would actually be COVID-19. All right. Okay, so these are the 3 time period. Let me just show you the answers over here. Okay, so the first one will be your global recession. The point is R, global recession. So there's a financial crisis. So people lose their incomes and their jobs. They are unemployed. They are not able to travel. So people cut back on their spending. They reduce the demand for travel and expenditure to Japan. All right. Now the next one, which I mentioned the swine flu. So that is wrong. All right, so that is not supposed to be correct. Okay, why? Because the swine flu, if you went through the slides, is affecting US, Mexico, as well as US, Mexico, and I think if we look at the map, okay, some parts of China and Russia, Brazil, okay, these countries, all right? So Japan is not so much affected, which means that in 2010 to 2011, the numbers which decrease shouldn't be the swine flu. So my corrections for that, okay, it should be a disaster, all right, which is the March 2011 Tohoku earthquake, as well as the resulting nuclear radiation issue. All right, so this actually discourage visits as number one, there's safety risk. All right, number two, the disruption to essential tourist infrastructure and services. Okay, number three is that governments might also discourage visits to Japan. All right, so there are three different reasons over here. Okay, so let me just highlight it for you. Number one, okay, number two, the disruption to services. Okay, number three is the government discourage visiting to Japan. All right. Now, and the last factor, okay, diseases. So this one will be the COVID-19, okay, becoming a pandemic that has spread globally, right? So COVID-19, I'm sure we all know about it. So you can explain, so how does this cause a fluctuation in global tourism, all right? In particular, tourism in Japan. Okay, so the World Health Organization and governments around the world actually issued health warnings, all right, and then they ban travel or they discourage travel. So this actually has a result in decreasing travel in worldwide, and so Japan is heavily affected. Okay, and if I didn't recall wrongly, at that time, the government of Japan, they also banned travel to the country itself. So that's why you see there's a huge decrease. Okay, huge decrease in the number of travelers. All right. So we have come to the end of this lesson. What you need to take away from you. Okay, number one is that with regards to this Japan example, Japan is quite an unfortunate country. Okay, because they are faced with so many issues. You see, they are faced with recessions, they are faced with disaster, okay, they are faced with diseases, right? But jokes aside is that what you need to take away from this lesson, okay, you need to know all the 4 different factors which results in the drop in global tourism, all right? Be it lesser people wanting to travel, okay, or be it that the governments do not want people to travel itself, okay? So you need to know the factors, as well as you need to know some of the case studies for each of these factors. And finally, you need to be able to explain, okay, how all these factors actually cause the fluctuation in tourist numbers. All right, so with that, I've come to the end of the lesson. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.